Maren Voss noticed the umbrella by the door first, pale blue, not hers, not Julian's. Then the second coffee cup drying on the rack. Selina Marsh had been back in the country for 6 weeks, and in that time she'd become a fixture in the house Maren shared with her fiancé, the way damp becomes a fixture in a basement, quiet, persistent, and slowly ruining the foundation. She twisted her ankle on the stairs at her building, Julian said, not quite meeting her eyes. I told her to stay here until the swelling goes down. Of course, Maren said that he softened at that, mistaking her calm for agreement. You know how she is. She doesn't like asking for help. It took everything for her to admit she needed somewhere to stay. Maren knew exactly how Selina was. She had watched it for 6 weeks, the trembling voice that firmed up the instant Julian left the room, the ankle that limped dramatically past Maren and walked fine down to the kitchen at midnight. But every time Maren said anything, Julian's face closed like a door. She's fragile, Maren. She's had a hard year. I need you to be gentle with her. Maren had stopped arguing 2 weeks ago. Arguing required Julian to actually hear her, and lately he only heard Selina, her laugh through the guest room wall, her voice calling his name for things that used to be Maren's to ask him for. Open a jar. Reach the top shelf. Sit with her until she fell asleep, because thunderstorms frightened her, apparently. At 29, Maren went to work. She always went to work. It was the one room in her life Selina hadn't found a way into yet. That evening, scrolling through her phone in the break room, she found the post anyway. Selina, glowing, captioned beneath a photo of Julian asleep in a chair beside the guest bed, he wouldn't leave until he knew I was okay. Some people just have a good heart. Maren set the phone face down on the table and finished her coffee before it went cold. The morning it happened, Maren had asked Julian for a ride to the clinic. Nothing urgent, she'd said, just a checkup, but the cramping had started that morning and something about it felt different from her usual pain, sharper, wrong in a way her body understood before her mind did. Can it wait? I told Selina I'd take her to get her prescription refilled. It can't really wait, Maren said. I think something's happening. He drove her, but distractedly, checking his phone at every light for Selina's texts. Halfway there, Maren doubled over, and when she straightened up there was blood on the seat. Julian's face twisted, not with fear, but with something closer to disgust. Maren, come on. Not on the upholstery. I'm bleeding, Julian. I know. I just cleaned this car. He pulled over 2 blocks short of the clinic. Can you walk from here? Selina's waiting. She got out. She did not remember deciding to get out, her body simply obeyed him, the way it had learned to for 8 years. He was already checking his mirror to merge back into traffic before she'd shut the door. She called a cab from the curb, rain soaking through her coat, one hand pressed low against her stomach as though she could hold something in by force of will alone. At the hospital, a doctor with tired eyes and a kind voice told her what she already suspected. 10 weeks. Too early to have said anything to anyone, even Julian. She'd wanted to be sure first, wanted one more ultrasound before she let herself hope out loud. The bleeding may have been manageable if you'd come in sooner, the doctor said gently, not unkindly, simply factually. I'm sorry. She called Julian from the waiting room. He didn't pick up. She tried twice more. When he finally called back, 3 hours later, Selina was laughing in the background. Everything sorted at the clinic? He asked, distracted. She looked at the discharge papers in her lap. Yes, she said. Everything sorted. She didn't tell him. Not that night, not the next morning, when he came home smelling of the restaurant Selina had wanted, carrying a paper bag of leftovers he set on the counter without asking if Maren had eaten. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up the email from her company's Singapore office, a director role, restructuring the regional accounts team, a role she'd been quietly offered 3 months ago and had quietly declined because Julian didn't want to do long distance during wedding planning. She wrote back before she could talk herself out of it. I'm in. When do you need me there? The reply came within the hour, thrilled. We can have you relocated within 6 weeks if you're ready to move fast. She was ready. She had never in her life been more ready for anything. That weekend, Selina's ankle had apparently healed enough for her to monopolize the kitchen, cooking something elaborate while narrating her recovery journey to Julian like a war story. Maren stood in the doorway and watched him laugh at something Selina said, watched him rest a hand on the small of her back to reach past her for a spice jar, a gesture so casually intimate that Maren felt something in her chest go very still, very quiet, the way a house goes quiet right before a storm hits. You're just going to stand there? Selina said, catching her eye, smiling the smile of someone who has already won and wants you to watch her collect the prize. Come try this. Julian says I have a gift. I'm sure you do, Maren said, and went upstairs. She didn't cry. She had cried plenty in the last week, in the hospital bathroom, in the cab home, in the shower where the water disguised it. She was done crying where anyone could see. She began packing that night, quietly, methodically, while Julian and Selina watched a movie downstairs, their laughter drifting up through the floorboards like something from another house, another life. She packed only what was hers. The suits. The laptop. The small jewelry box that held her grandmother's ring, not the engagement ring Julian had given her, which she left in its case on the dresser, closed, final. She left the honeymoon brochures. She left the seating chart for a wedding that increasingly felt like something that had happened to a different woman. In the morning, she called the venue and cancelled the deposit. She called the photographer. She called her sister, who didn't ask many questions, just said, "It's about time," in a voice that suggested she'd been waiting a long while to say it. The last thing she did was open the family contacts form on her phone and remove Julian as her emergency contact. Her thumb hovered over the button longer than she expected. 8 years of being the name he'd call if something happened to her. Except something had happened to her, and he hadn't come. She replaced his name with her sister's. That evening, Julian found her in the study, folder open, papers organized with the same tidy precision she'd brought to every account she'd ever managed. "What's all this?" "Relocation paperwork," she said. "I'm taking the Singapore role." He blinked like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "We talked about this." "I said not during the wedding planning." "There isn't a wedding," she said. "I cancelled it this morning." The silence that followed had a texture to it, thick and sudden, like the air right before lightning. Downstairs, Selina's voice called up something cheerful and oblivious about dinner. Julian's face did something complicated, anger first, quick and easy, the emotion he reached for fastest. "You're doing this because of Selina." "She's a guest, Maren. She has nowhere else." "I lost the baby," Maren said. She was gone before Julian noticed anything was wrong, or rather, before he let himself notice, which was a different thing entirely. He'd grown used to a version of Maren who absorbed his distraction like a stone absorbs rain, quietly, without visible damage. It didn't occur to him that stones erode too, slowly, from the inside, until one day there's nothing left to stand on. The day she left, he came home late, Selina trailing behind him with a bag of takeout, still narrating some minor drama from her afternoon. He noticed the house was too quiet before he noticed anything specific, no kettle ticking, no sound of Maren's laptop fan from the study. He found the closet first. Half empty, hangers swinging loose where her coats had been. Then the dresser drawer, and the ring sitting alone in its little ceramic dish like an accusation. Then the note on the kitchen counter, 4 lines in Maren's neat handwriting. "You told me I had no right to object. So I stopped objecting. The transfer papers are in my email if HR asks. Don't call my office, I've already left the building, in every sense. I hope you and Selina are very happy. I mean that less kindly than it sounds. M." He called her. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Same. Selina hovered at the kitchen doorway, takeout bag still in hand, watching his face change from confusion to something raw. She's being dramatic, Selina offered. She'll cool off. He turned to look at her, really look, the way he hadn't in weeks, and something in his expression made her take a small step back. How long has her ankle actually hurt, Selina? What? Your ankle. How long has it actually been hurt? She opened her mouth, then closed it. He didn't wait for the answer. He was already dialing Maren's supervisor, a number he'd gotten years ago for some now irrelevant emergency and never deleted. Marcus picked up on the second ring, his voice carefully neutral. Mr. Reyes. Where is she? Ms. Voss is no longer with this office as of this morning. She's been reassigned to our Singapore division. Since when? She never said anything about Singapore. She said quite a lot, actually. Just not to you. Julian's hand tightened on the phone. I need to reach her. It's important. She anticipated you'd say that. A pause, unhurried, almost kind in its bluntness. She also said not to give you her new number. I'm going to respect that. It was 2 days before he found the hospital envelope, tucked inside a box of old photographs Maren had left behind because they were from before Selina, before the arguments, before any of it, pictures of the two of them at 24, unguarded and easy with each other in a way that felt now like photographs of strangers. The envelope had no note. Just the papers themselves, an ultrasound image, 10 weeks, dated the same week Selina's ankle had first started keeping her overnight in the guest room. A discharge summary. A single line that undid something structural in his chest. Patient reports partner declined to transport to nearest hospital, delay likely contributed to pregnancy loss. He sat on the floor of the study for a long time. Selina found him there. She'd been quieter since Maren left, the performance had lost its audience, and without Julian's guilt to perform against, she seemed unsure what expression to make. She crouched beside him, reaching for the papers. Julian. Did you know she was pregnant? No. I swear, I didn't. You knew she was bleeding that morning. You were in the car. Silence answered that one honestly, for once. You told me to keep driving, he said slowly, remembering it now with a clarity that hadn't been available to him at the time, when Selina's voice had filled every space in his head that might otherwise have held a warning. You said she was being dramatic about her period. I didn't know. Stop saying that. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I don't think you ever knew anything, Selina. I think you just never asked, because the answer might have gotten in your way. She started crying, the same trembling, practiced cry that had worked on him for 2 months, and for the first time, he watched it happen from the outside, the way Maren must have watched it 100 times, the calculated pause, the perfectly timed waver in her voice, the eyes that checked his face between sobs to see if it was working. It wasn't working. Something in him had gone still and clear, the way water goes still right before ice forms. I think you should go home, Selina. Julian, please. I'm not asking twice. The story didn't stay contained to that house, of course. Julian's mother, Renata, had never fully trusted Selina, and once the hospital papers surfaced, she made sure the rest of the family understood exactly what her son had allowed to happen under his roof. You let her bleed in the rain, Renata said at the kitchen table, the discharge papers spread in front of her like evidence in a trial only she seemed willing to conduct properly. You pushed a pregnant woman out of a moving car because you were worried about the upholstery. I didn't know she was pregnant, you didn't need to know that to treat her like a human being. Renata's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I raised you better than this, Julian. I don't know where you misplaced it. The wedding, already unofficially cancelled by Maren's own hand, became officially so within the family the following week. Renata called every relative who'd received a save-the-date personally, sparing Julian the humiliation of having to explain it and denying him, in the same act, any chance to control the narrative. Selina tried, in the weeks after, to salvage what she could of her social standing, a soft focus photo of herself at a window, a caption about being misunderstood, about giving too much of her heart and getting blamed for other people's unraveling. It gathered sympathy for about 6 hours, then someone, not Maren, who was by then thousands of miles away and asleep most hours the post was live, leaked screenshots from a group chat Selina had used to narrate her campaign in real time. He fell asleep with his hand on my stomach, can you believe it? She's going to lose it when she sees this. Another, made him cancel the honeymoon plans, lol, too easy. The sympathy reversed itself overnight, the way these things do. Friends who had liked her fragile window post went quiet. The part-time position she'd had at a company owned by Julian's family evaporated within the week, no formal termination required, merely a schedule that stopped including her. She hadn't lost a fight. She'd simply run out of an audience willing to keep pretending the performance was real. Singapore, in its first weeks, did not feel like healing. It felt like static, a low, constant hum of dislocation, new streets that refused to become familiar no matter how many times Maren walked them, a language of small transactions she was still learning to navigate without translating everything in her head first. She kept the hospital envelope in the bottom drawer of her new apartment's single dresser. Not because she needed to look at it, but because some griefs deserve a permanent address, even a small one, even a drawer. Work saved her, in the unglamorous, unromantic way work sometimes does, not because it healed anything, but because it demanded enough of her hours that grief had less room to sprawl. Her new project lead, a quiet, precise man named Theo Lindqvist, had a habit of noticing things without commenting on them, which turned out to be exactly the kind of attention she could tolerate. The first time he left a sandwich by her laptop without a word, she almost snapped at him out of habit, "I'm fine, I don't need managing," and then didn't, because he was already 3 desks away, uninterested in being thanked. "You moved that same coffee cup for 4 hours today," he said, the one time she asked him about it. "That usually means someone forgot to eat. I'm not your responsibility." "I know," he said, entirely unbothered. "I brought a sandwich, not a marriage proposal." It became, without either of them naming it, a rhythm. He didn't ask about the ring-shaped indentation still faintly visible on her finger for the first month. He didn't ask why she flinched, once, when a coworker's baby photo circulated through the office chat. He simply adjusted around the shape of her, the way water adjusts around a stone, without needing an explanation for why the stone was there. Julian called, in the early months, more times than she answered. Letters came to her office, which she returned unopened. He arrived once, in person, holding a bakery bag like an offering, and stood outside her building for 40 minutes before her supervisor quietly informed security not to admit him. "Do you want me to deal with him?" Theo had asked, watching from the window. "No." "Do you want to?" "No," she said, and this time it was true. "I want to keep working." So they did. 2 years folded into each other the way months do when a life has finally found its footing, not dramatic, not cinematic, just steady, brick by brick. Maren was promoted. Then promoted again. The division she'd been sent to stabilize became, under her direction, the most profitable regional office in the company, a fact that occasionally reached her old colleagues back home and, through them, presumably reached Julian too, though she never asked. Theo remained beside her in the unhurried way patient people do. He never asked her to explain the wedding she never mentioned, never pushed his hand toward the small of her back the way Julian used to with Selina, a gesture Maren had once mistaken for tenderness and now understood as something closer to ownership. On the anniversary of the miscarriage, she took the day off without explaining why, and found a small paper bag waiting on her desk when she returned the next morning anyway, a pastry, and a note in his careful handwriting, "No need to explain anything. Just eat something today." She didn't cry from sadness. She cried because for the first time in years, someone had noticed her pain without asking it to perform for him. When he finally asked her to dinner, it was after a long client call, offered with the same unbothered ease he brought to everything. "If you say no, we still have the Kessler account meeting tomorrow at 9. She laughed despite herself. "That may be the least romantic invitation I've ever received." "Good," he said. Romance shouldn't sound like a threat. She told him about Julian eventually, not all at once, in pieces over many months, the way you hand someone a puzzle box a few pieces at a time to see if they'll still want the whole picture once they understand its shape. He never demanded more of the story than she offered. One evening, almost 3 years to the day since she'd boarded a plane with a suitcase of only what was hers, she admitted to him that she wasn't certain she knew how to love without flinching anymore. "I'm not asking you to replace what you lost," he said simply. "I'm asking if I can walk beside what's left." Outside, it had started to rain. For the first time in a long while, the sound didn't feel like abandonment. It just felt like weather. She flew home for the company's annual leadership summit the following spring. Maren Voss, Director, Asia-Pacific Division, her name printed clean and singular on the event program, no longer attached to anyone else's story. Julian was there. She'd known he might be. His family still held a minority stake in the parent company, and old habits of appearing at events he had no real reason to attend apparently died hard. He looked thinner than she remembered, worn in a way that money and tailoring couldn't quite disguise. No Selina beside him. She'd heard, secondhand and without particular interest, that Selina had left the city entirely after the fallout, chasing some fresh circle of people who didn't yet know her reputation. He found her on the terrace after the formal part of the evening ended, the city glittering below them the way cities do when they don't know or care what's happened inside any particular window. "Maren." She turned. He looked at her the way a man looks at a door he's spent years imagining walking back through, only to find, once there, that he's forgotten every line he meant to say. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know you were pregnant." "If I'd known." "You didn't need to know that," she said, "to treat me like a person worth stopping the car for." He flinched like the words had weight, because they did. "I think about it every day," he said. "The call. I hear it sometimes, still." "That's yours to carry now," she said, without cruelty, just fact. "I carried it alone for long enough. Is there any chance?" "No." She said it gently, which somehow made it land harder than anger would have. "I don't hate you, Julian. I just don't recognize the space where you used to stand. It closed a long time ago, and something better grew over it." Behind the glass doors, she could see Theo speaking easily with her old supervisor, unbothered, unhovering, trusting her enough to let her stand alone with her past for as long as she needed to. That, she'd learned, was what real care looked like. Not a hand pressed to someone else's stomach for the world to photograph, but simply staying, quietly, without needing applause for it. She left Julian on the terrace with his apology and walked back into the light.